Right now, your body is following instructions you never gave it. Your heart is beating, your lungs are pulling in air. You are not deciding to do any of it. Now imagine that one morning your legs start to move. You begin to dance, and you cannot stop. Not for a joke, not for a minute. You dance for hours, then for days. Your feet split open, your heart pounds against your ribs, and still your body will not stop dancing until it kills you. This is not a horror movie. It happened. In the summer of 1518, in a city in what is now France, hundreds of people began to dance. No one told them to. No one could make them stop. And by the end, dozens of them had danced themselves to death. For 500 years, we have known exactly what happened. We still cannot fully explain why. And the answer hiding underneath it is far more disturbing than a medieval curse. It started with one woman. Her name was Frau Troffea. On a narrow street in Strasbourg, in July of 1518, she stepped outside her home and began to dance. There was no music, there was no festival, there was no reason. She just danced. Her neighbors watched. At first it was strange, maybe even funny, but she did not stop when the sun went down. She danced through the night. She danced into the next morning. Her body drenched in sweat, her face blank, her legs shaking, and still she kept moving, as if something inside her had taken the wheel and locked the door. By the fourth day, she was still dancing, and then something happened that nobody could explain. She was no longer alone. Her neighbors did not pull her inside. They joined her. Within a week, 34 people were dancing in the streets of Strasbourg. Within a month, the number reached 400. And here is the first thing that makes this story so unsettling. None of them seemed to want to do it. These were not people celebrating. Witnesses described the dancers as terrified. They screamed for help. They begged for someone to make their bodies stop. Their faces showed no joy at all, only exhaustion and fear, while their arms and legs kept twisting and jerking as if they belonged to someone else. The authorities of Strasbourg had no idea what they were looking at, so they turned to the physicians of the city. And the doctors reached a conclusion that, by the logic of their time, made perfect sense. They decided this was a disease of hot blood, and the cure for hot blood, they believed, was to let it burn itself out. In other words, the dancers needed to keep dancing. So the city did something almost impossible to believe. They helped. They cleared a guild hall and an open-air market. They brought in a wooden stage. They hired musicians to play, and they paid healthy people to dance alongside the afflicted, to keep them moving. The city of Strasbourg, trying to save these people, built them a dance floor. And the dying got worse. Picture it, a medieval city square in the brutal heat of July, drums and pipes playing without pause, and hundreds of people dancing with the empty, exhausted faces of the damned, some of them having moved without real rest for days. Their bodies began to fail in the ways bodies do when pushed past every limit. People collapsed from sheer exhaustion. Some had strokes. Some had heart attacks, their hearts simply giving out under the strain. According to one account from the time, at the peak of the plague, around 15 people were dying every single day. They did not die from a wound. They did not die from a poison anyone could find. They died because they could not stop moving, in front of a crowd, on a stage the city had built for them, while musicians played them toward their graves. And then, almost as strangely as it began, it stopped. By early September, the dancing faded. The survivors were quietly led away, many taken to a shrine to pray for a saint to lift the curse. The streets went silent. And the question was left behind, hanging over the city for the next 5 centuries. What in God's name had just happened? For a long time, the easiest answer was poison. There is a fungus called ergot that grows on damp rye, the exact grain these people ate as bread. Ergot contains chemicals related to LSD. Eat enough of it, and you can suffer convulsions, hallucinations, and burning sensations in your limbs. It is a clean explanation. It is also, almost certainly, wrong. Ergot poisoning cuts off blood flow to the hands and feet. It often leads to gangrene. It would have made it nearly impossible to walk, let alone dance, for days. and it does not explain why the victims moved in a coordinated, purposeful way, dancing specifically, rather than simply convulsing on the ground. So historians turned to a different kind of answer, and this is where it gets genuinely strange. The leading explanation today is that the dancing plague was not a poisoning of the body at all. It was a sickness of the mind. Spreading from person to person with no germ involved, it has a name: mass psychogenic illness, sometimes called mass hysteria. It is a real, documented phenomenon in which physical symptoms, real ones, spread through a group of people purely through psychological stress. No virus, no toxin. The mind alone, generating real, physical effects in dozens of bodies at once. And in 1518, Strasbourg was the perfect place for it. Consider what these people had just lived through. A series of brutal famines had left the city starving. Disease, including smallpox and syphilis, was sweeping the region. And on top of all of it, the people of Strasbourg held a specific, terrifying belief. There was a saint, Saint Vitus, and they believed he could curse sinners with a compulsion to dance. The dancing was not random. It was the exact shape of their deepest fear. A population pushed to the absolute edge of human stress, sharing one specific nightmare. And one woman cracked first. And then, like a yawn moving through a room, it spread. It is tempting to file this away as a medieval problem. Superstitious people, in a desperate century, breaking under pressure they did not understand. But mass psychogenic illness did not die in 1518. In 1962, in a school in Tanzania, 3 girls started laughing. They could not stop. The laughter spread to nearly 1,000 people, forced schools to close for months, and lasted, on and off, for over a year. In 2011, in a town in New York, a group of high school students suddenly developed uncontrollable twitches and verbal tics, with no medical cause anyone could find. Doctors landed on the same conclusion: mass psychogenic illness. Stress, given a physical shape, jumping from mind to mind. And in the age of the internet, something even stranger is happening. Researchers have documented groups of teenagers developing identical tics after watching the same videos online, thousands of miles apart, having never met. The fire that needed a crowded medieval street in 1518 now travels through a screen in your hand. Because here is the thing the dancing plague actually proves. Your brain is not the sealed, private control room you think it is. It is constantly, silently scanning the people around you, copying them, syncing to them, far below the level of your awareness. It is why you yawn when someone else yawns. It is why one person's panic can empty a building. Most of the time, this invisible wiring keeps us together. It is the thing that lets a species survive by feeling as one. But under enough fear, in the right conditions, that same wiring can turn a single person's breaking point into a contagion. The people of Strasbourg were not weak, and they were not stupid. They were human, with the same hardware you are running right now. They danced because they could not imagine stopping. We like to believe we would be different, that our minds belong only to us. The dancers of 1518 almost certainly believed that too, right up until the morning their own bodies stepped into the street and began to move.